All right, here we go. Okay, welcome everyone to this episode of Perseus Conversations. I would like to welcome Peter, Dr. Peter Duchemin, I believe it is, Duchemin.
No, Duchemin is fine.
Duchemin. Yeah. Oh, I'm butchering the name.
Yeah, we're French.
Peter is an absolute inspiration. From first corresponding with Peter and then meeting Peter in Hong Kong, and having him share Meta Magick with myself and a few others in Hong Kong. I mean, absolutely mind-blowing. You can see my post back on Perseus about this. So it's going to be interesting to hear from Peter today as we break it all down. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks, James.
Okay, so let's begin. So you have done one of the most amazing interviews, written interviews for Perseus. It's 7,000 or 8,000 words. It's epic. It's really epic, and I think as well it's so epic sometimes people miss what Meta Magick is, or maybe they're so blown away by it they don't really know how they can apply it. So if we can look at it and maybe break it down into more basic terms for people who are completely new to Meta Magick and the way you approach magic.
So I guess what I'll say is Meta Magick isn't a system. Meta Magick is simply an approach to magical systems. It's a way of treating them such that they can be understood, parsed, combined, deconstituted, reconstituted, reverse engineered, grown, or otherwise engaged with in a mode that's appropriate to our present, which is, I would say, a horizon of spiritual, social, material development that is singular and highly intent as a species. And so what Meta Magick is a way of saying all magics are open to all magics are to be brought to the horizon of the contemporary present, and in that space changed or otherwise reevaluated. So it's kind of saying that magic is about the present, and that we can bring inspiration from multiple different sources and traditions. And for example, we can combine syncretically Buddhism and Kabbalah, but there's ways that this can be done, and there's ways to do this wisely, and there's ways to make a mess of it. And so Meta Magick studies the ways that novel magical combinations can be formed, and in such a way that they have wholesome or holistic effects, so integral effects. How can we work with magical systems openly, in the open, in an open field of combination, such that the combinations we produce are wholesome?
Wow. So if we then, I'm going off track a little bit here, but if we then take what would be the difference for someone coming in with maybe like a traditional background in a system?
Okay.
And so is this meaning sort of like the guardrails are coming down? Is this meaning like the idea of our way and then other ways is coming down? So is it a perspective, a lens that we're putting over these things?
It's more like a plane that we are opening these things onto. It's a broader horizon or field of play that we are bringing our traditional knowledges into contact with, almost like coming to the bowl of a horizon and bringing as many different perspectives to the bowl of that horizon so that they can see each other. on that kind of that bowl. I would say that I have a great deal of respect for traditions. In fact, one of the things I like about traditions is that they are far more flexible than many would claim them to be. Many would mischaracterize a tradition as a rigid thing full of rules and arbitrary constructs, but it's quite the opposite. Traditions are survivors. They're robust, intelligent, rich survivors that have adapted to changing circumstances, and they have never stopped changing. So traditions are our most valuable resource. So in this respect, I have a bit of a chaos magic ethos in that I do believe in being able to transcend traditions, but I don't believe in erasing them or devaluing them. In fact, one could say that this is, meta magic in my thinking is a combination of simultaneously holding a chaos magic and a traditionalist magic ethos. But so, what do you do with a system? Well, you study it deeply in the recognition that it is one way up the proverbial mountain, and maybe you stick with that. I mean, there are traditions that I actually do not. I mean, I have a kung fu practice in which I'm very much married to one specific style, and I'm not doing MMIA or combining it. I'm respecting that style. So that's an important thing. But what I recognize is it's not the be all and end all or the only style. I don't see the limits of my style as the parameters or limits of all styles. And similarly, as magicians working with traditional systems, if we can start to see that the limits we see, which we perceive to be actually the metaphysical structure of the universe, because that's the power of magical systems, is to create this kind of hypnosis whereby the structure of our mnemonics and the structure of our models gets perceived as the actual structure of the universe. Well, I'm kind of saying, look beyond that structure. Look into the pure field of absolute potential out of which all structures in every society have emerged and to which they converge, and then bring the traditions to that horizon and operate from that space, from that.
Okay, I'm getting it. Okay, that helps. That really helps. Okay, yeah, because I think it's like is your vision is so kind of it's so unique that some of us like myself sometimes miss it, but it's so that really helps me understand where you're coming from. You mentioned a word there, hypnosis. Let's move on to another question we have, which is, in the last interview you spoke about calendar hypnosis and how calendars, they fundamentally shape the human experience. So this is a wonderful part of the interview to read. But could you go more into this? Could you expand on its relevance to magic and its relevance to meta magic?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and even riffing off what I just previously said, when we have structural systems that operate like filters that show us the world, and if we are in a way like a fishbowl, if we're unaware, if we haven't had an extraneous experience, if we haven't been in another calendar, for example, we tend to see the world in the terms that our calendar supplies us with, and in a way that we remain naive about it. It's quite similar to language. So for a monoglot, for someone who speaks only one language, the world seems as if it corresponds to the furniture of that language. But something really extraordinary happens when you learn a second language, which is that with language number 2, you actually don't end up with 2 languages. You end up with 2 and a bit. And what that bit is the differential between the 2 languages, because you learn that the second language, especially if they're radically far apart as, for example, English and Chinese. I mean, maybe it's different if you're going from English to French, but if you go really far apart, and you learn these two radically different languages that, according to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, essentially influence what you can perceive of the world. You learn that the language is the filter, and you start to see a glimpse of the world in an unfiltered way. In that differential, you see the unfiltered. So what's interesting about my approach to calendrics is really what I want to do is to provide, is to show us how to become calendrical polyglots, as well as inventors of, I guess we could call them, like we have constructed languages like Esperanto and so on. Well, constructed calendars as a means of experimenting with the types of filter that we can have and increasing this differential, which allows us to see unmediated temporality that is not, we'll say, chronoformed by a calendar system, where the calendar system essentially takes wild time, which is just some oscillation of some body in the universe, like the sun, the moon, the cesium atom. And the calendar or the clock will then chronoform it and then translate that oscillation into a bunch of human, contextualizable, memorizable, thinkable structures. So if we radically increase the number of reference of oscillations that we are starting to look at, then we start to see how big the train really is, and we start to perceive the universe and its eternal pulsations in themselves, while at the same time being able to create inhabited spaces, inhabitable by our thought, and livable as our temporalities. So I kind of envision a forest of temporalities, polytemporal living, where each person may be living in an absolutely unique temporal signature because they have access to, a unique combination of times. And so that's basically challenging calendar hypnosis, not by trying to counteract it, but trying to flood it. You know what I mean? One of the best ways to challenge a hypnosis is to break its monopoly on the psyche.
That is wonderful. But hearing you talk about it like that makes a lot of sense. All the things you mentioned in Hong Kong now are kind of like breaking out of their crystallized form, and I can okay, wow, that's amazing. So more on. Let's go from that. Now this is a real deep dive. You touched on the concept previously also in the previous interview and in our many discussions on meta magical fields.
Yes.
And the magical energy zones that are anchored within mathematical structures.
Right.
So this, for someone who, new to this, is like, whoa, what's happening here? Okay, could we make sense of this and bring it down for people?
Yep. So meta magical fields are the way that we so if you just start wildly blending magical systems without any methodology, what will happen is you will end up with a mutant monster that has a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and no really, we'll say, coherent architecture. And of course, we're all warned about this, right? You don't, especially in Kung Fu, because I keep coming back to that. If you just start wildly combining without understanding, you end up with a very superficial comprehension. Now, someone might point to Bruce Lee and say, well, what about, Jeet Kune Do? Well, Bruce Lee's a different story because Bruce Lee had an understanding to begin with, and he makes it look easy to combine these things, and that could be deceptive. Meta Magick can make it look easy to construct syncretic systems, but the truth is that syncretic systems, if they're not done methodologically or with an intelligence involved, they can just pollute all this. It's like making bad soup with random things. So you need to have a kind of methodology, and what that methodology is what we call meta magic fields. And they're basically magic squares. It basically comes down to studying magic squares, and I don't mean the canonical kamiya as such, although you can study them, or the squares in a Bremelin, or you can certainly study these, the Satora Repos square, also stars and tesseracts and circles. So the best place to find these is actually books for recreational mathematicians. So recreational mathematics is the thing. And I would say that the single best grimoire for these kinds of fields is the Zen, a book called The Zen of Magic Squares, Circles, and Stars by Cliff Pickover. So starting looking into Martin Gardner, or look into recreational mathematicians, and you'll find that they compose these unbelievable harmonic structures. And what's beautiful about a magic square is it represents a special configuration of a series of elements such that a intrinsic harmony is displayed in that series. So, for example, the famous one is the Lo Shu, or the what's known as the Kamiya of Saturn, which is the first magic square that human beings documented, and it goes back to ancient China, where the Yellow Emperor is said to have seen it on the back of a great tortoise that rose from the sea. And this is a 3x3 square with the numbers 1 to 9 laid out in it, so that all the horizontals, verticals, and diagonals total the same amount, which is 15. So it's the sum of the numbers 1 to n arranged so it has this this harmonic. Cliff Pickover talks about this as being akin to a frozen music. So what the magic square, or the star, or the circle, or whatever it is does is find the harmonic of the series. So what I do is, because I don't want to just import piecemeal bits of a magical system into each other and confuse the planes, right? Confusion of the planes is bad. If you're integrating, you need to have separate, discrete organs that are taking inputs and giving outputs within a total integrated system. So the outputs feed into other inputs and so forth. So you want a kind of an Ouroboros effect. And the way to do this is to recognize that within any magical system, you have sets of ideas that are meant to be understood in as components of a whole. A perfect example of this is if we look at the Bhava chakra in Buddhism, right, which is the wheel of life in Buddhism. You have 6 worlds, 12 links of codependent origination, 3 root poisons driving the wheel. This is a complete system of the world. So if I were to just take 3 of the worlds and combine them with something else, I would end up with a mess. But what I can do is I can take the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, which combines the 6 worlds, right? That activates or creates a seed consciousness or a seed awareness in each of the 6 worlds. And what I can do is I can operate that on the hexagram. Excuse me. So I can, in a sense, and this is where it comes to the idea of fields. So I can take that and as a whole, and I can find ways of mapping it on to some sort of magic structure. Another example is I have a torus that has 5 rings combined in a ring, right? So 5 rings in a ring, and it's the numbers 1 to 25 that are, so each ring is a little pentagram. So if you imagine 5 pentagrams that are arranged in a circle around a center, as if they are cross sections of this torus, and the numbers 1 to 25 are arranged in each of these such that the sum total of each of these pentagrams is 65, which has important geometric ideas, but also the spirals that move around this torus also have that same magic sum. So you get many, many, many instances. So what I've done is I've taken the 25 letters of the Druidic alphabet, the Om, and I have mapped them on this. So I call this the Om star. And what it's not just a torus, it actually lets you generate magic squares. So what we can do is, this is an unorthodox thing to do, but we can take a whole magic system, which is the Om, and then we can apply it to this toroidal structure, and then we can combine the toroidal structure in our internal meditations with other structures. So we can put something in the middle. A perfect example is also from this same book, a set of 30 hexagons that have been tiled such that there are 9 rings. So it's the numbers 1 to 30 that produce 9 rings in this hexagonal array. Each ring has the mathematical value of 93. So this is an important number for Thelemites because it corresponds to the words love and will in Greek, but it's also the numbers 1 to 30. And that's an important number for Enochian scholars, right? Because there's 30 aethers. So what I've done is I've mapped, so instead of using the traditional hierarchy where you have, this idea of the watchtowers in the center and in these concentric rings going, Tex in the middle going all the way up to Lil on the outside. Instead of that, I've taken the ethers and I have inputted them into the hexagon cells. So I have this magic structure that horizontalizes the Enochian hierarchy and places it in this, what I call the Magin hive. The word Magin, Mem, Gimel, Nun, means shield, and it has the value of 93. So the Magin star, the hexagram, is the shield star, and it has that value of 93. So I call it the Magin star. Wow. So you imagine this this hexagon, and what can I do with it? Well, I just mentioned the Ogum and this hexagon, so I could actually envision this Ogum with a hexagon in the middle of it. So I can bring the whole resonating structure of the Magin star or the Magin hive, and I can place it in my meditations within this circular ring. And by translating magical systems onto these fields, because that's what they are, they're integrated fields. By translating them onto the fields, I can then combine the fields with one another and create more and more and more sophisticated and layered structures that are nevertheless understood as expressions of the plenum. So we're not imagining ourselves as at the bottom of a metaphysical hierarchy that we have to climb to, but rather within a plenum such that our imaginings and our contemplations operate like flowers that express that plenum. And what we want to do, much more than climb up to the lost unity, is grow beautiful flowers of contemplation. Because those are our mnemotechnic resources. Those are our energetic fields. Those are our, we'll say, parsings of the chaos of the world. Those are our metabolizations of contingency that we pass on. And that's what magic has always been, is a metabolization of contingency and chaos and fear and the unknown, such that it becomes livable and then passable on to the next generation as a gift of the labor of our pain and our love and our engagement with the real. And if we are really in the work, this is what we're here to do, is to grow this garden that we can give to the next generation.
Wow.
I believe it's about fields.
Well, Peter, that I might need to cut all that out and put that out as its own thing. That's amazing, an amazing explanation. Thank
you.
Wow, and you also touched on what we were going to go to next, which is the Enochian. So I mean, recently I've been talking with other people about Enochian on some other episodes, and it's still a bit of a mystery to me, Enochian. So you said there what you've done with the ethers. I mean, so in the way your integration of Enochian magic with your Meta Magick work, and you've described how it's now this horizontal rather than a vertical hierarchical. Was there anything else necessary in order for you to bring Enochian in, and what was the reason for it? What do you see as us gaining from Enochian? Because it's still very mysterious for a lot of people.
Well, I would say yes, there's definitely something necessary, and it's an interpretation of what Enochian is.
Mm.
And I may ruffle some feathers here, but I'm going to say that I believe that Edward Kelly or Edward Talbot developed or was given this methodology of pattern compression, which is manifest in the watchtowers as well as in Liber Loga and the other examples that express themselves as tables of letters. I believe that its original language is English, and the script that was given to it as an ornamentation. I believe it's a type of cryptography, and that what Kelly did was memorize it as a practice, and then put on a show for Dee, because Dee needed to see this as an apocalypse whereby the structure of the universe was revealed. And so Kelly, not as a con man, but as somebody who was placed in the position of having an incredible, say, technicology. That's a word I use because technology is one thing, but technicology is techniques that have been highly refined, and they may not have a physical external body, but they are not quite they're not quite technologies, and they're not quite simple techniques. They're rich techniques that have a kind of compression. And I think there's a lot of this in the occult that it's easier, and probably you get more intensity of practice if you teach these things as revelations from an inscrutable divine source.
Right.
You get more mileage that way. But the truth, in my opinion, and what plays into, I suppose, the meta magic, is this is a non-cynical type of technicology. This isn't Kelly fooling Dee. Oh, it's just human invented stuff. No. This is it is divine in its beauty and its intelligence, but it's still very much a product of humaning. Of humans expressing the divine. So what Kelly, I believe, did was use the occasion with Dee to express this system, and it's very, very, very blinded as we see it in those texts. But over the centuries, it has been explored. In particular, David Allen Hulse published in his book, The Western Mysteries, a really nice deblinding of the logic of the Enochian Watchtower. So I would defer to his essay and his particular, I guess, a framing of the Watchtower. So his lettering, and so what I think this lets us do is recognize that this is a methodology. This is an incredible methodology of pattern compression that has huge consequences for how we see the world. It's no coincidence that it came into play at the dawn of colonialization. And that really was, Dee's principle, kind of like he was into spreading, the British Empire around the world. So this is a technology of mnemotechnic technology that gives the operator privileged access to forces that are otherwise encrypted. So it's almost like an encryption that gets descended upon the energy field, and then only the operator knows how to decrypt it. So they're at the advantage. And so the way I see it is treating it like a sacrosanct, terrifying magical system that we have to do exactly correctly, or else we will suffer terrible consequences. That has had the result of keeping it so outside of our own understanding through the intimidation of that we haven't sat down and looked at it and realized, hold on, this is a sophisticated mnemotechnic computer, and it's a prototype for a way of approaching information compression that we can use and we can improve upon, and we can change certain features. For example, if we're not so keen on the idea of the British Empire dominating everything through encrypting the spiritual flow of things, we can also we can reverse engineer it. I mean, that's really what I'm talking about, is lovingly reverse engineering it
Mhm.
and allowing new things to grow. And what I find speaks to me through these stories is fairy folklore. Fairy
Mhm.
folklore is what the Fae want me to grow an Enochian that they can play in. That and I'll just tell you one thing I did. I have a bit of a druidic inclination, it would seem. So I tried the experiment, knowing that the lettering, the original letters are in English. I tried the experiment of translating it not into Enochian script, but into Om. So the Om letters each have a tree associated with it and a bird and so on. So in my one of my experiments with Enochian, I created tablets with the sigils, but instead of the letters, it was Om. Om, because you can get a continuous line and you can draw the ohms, or oghams, right, is how it's spelled, but it's ohms. You can draw those lines along the sigil. So I've got a set of tablets that are entirely in ogham. And that was what actually opened a lot of the floodgates and allowed me to realize other structures. We can tap into this. We can create rich forests of pattern. And so for me, the four watchtowers are less of an architecture and more of a kind of arboric. They're more like an arboretum. Like the four
Mm.
watchtowers are filled with trees and birds. So
My word, that's a the kind of like you say, it's a pretty unique take on Enochian, but it makes a lot of sense.
I think there is a submerged druidry that snuck its way through Edward Kelly into Enochian, and Dee's mind needed it to be a apocalyptic Christian. He needed it to be skinned with an apocalyptic Christian narrative, but the framework itself can be skinned in many different ways. It's a framework, it's a chassis, it's an armature of energies that are composed in an incredibly beautiful and intricate manner. And I feel that we can carry it forward a lot more if we respect it and love it, but do not treat it like a relic, or you know what I mean?
Mm.
Because
Yeah. It's how we view it and
it's a
approach it.
method. It's it's
Yeah.
not it's not a it's not the Adamic language, the only secret, code to the entire universe. That's very, very Elizabethan thinking.
Mm.
But I don't think that that's what it is. I think that it is an incredible patterning technicology, and I think that we can do it. We can evolve it. This is what I want to see happen with Enochian. I want to see it profoundly evolve, and I think it's been sheltered from evolution by the taboos surrounding it.
There's a lot of fear, isn't there? There's a lot of fear and
Yeah.
apprehension surrounding it.
Also,
Wow.
Abramelin as well. Abramelin has that same thing, but I haven't brought myself to the courage to bring a Meta Magick treatment of Abramelin because it's terrifying. But I think that eventually Abramelin will also have to be engaged with like this.
Mm. Well, that leads us perfectly to see, because these are obviously, man, these are very deep, profound ways of viewing these things. I think so useful
It's
in so many
non-emanationist.
ways.
I want to just throw that word out there because David Chaim Smith has put that out there, and I've also been a non-emanationist for as long as I
Mm.
can remember. So it's a non-emanationist approach.
Okay, that makes sense.
Sorry to
Well,
interrupt.
that leads us to the the potential and the world changing potentials of meta magic. So where do you see this in terms of? Let's look at bigger things, transforming culture, society over the long term. Why is this important for evolution?
Okay. So I think that magic is a technicology. Traditional magic is a technicology of previous eras, notably eras before the heliocentric revolution. So it's a technicology of social economics and spiritual and mnemotechnic economics pertaining to geocentric and lococentric cosmologies. So most of our myths and astrology are part of a geocentric economy of psycho-spiritual social forces, and our elemental psychology are part of a deeper economy. But the rationalist economy of the modern period, which is the period from the Copernican revolution onward, has has engaged in incredibly like a zero-sum game, saying you know either magic is true or science is true, but not both. And it's put that out as if the kinds of truth claims that a magician makes and the kinds of truth claims that a scientist make are on the same playing field, but they're not. A magician is using a different type of language. Myth is a polyvalent way of expressing truth, and science is a monovalent way of establishing incredibly stable markers. And so these are different kinds of things, and they're approached in different ways. But one of the consequences of this is over the course of the modern period. So we see that the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution and so on, the rationalism and the emergence of this model that we call rationalist materialism is this very airtight or seemingly airtight way of making the claim that everything has a discernible rational cause, and that if we look into all appearances, we will find a mechanism that support it. And we've done this all the way down to essentially this quantum foam, beyond which we cannot find mechanistic mechanisms. We can't find the clockwork of the universe because it's not there. So the materialist paradigm kind of ends at that point and sort of struggles to say, oh yeah, but we hold in the macrocosmic, even though someone once said to me, that's like saying the universe is made entirely of atoms of silver, but or an object that is made entirely of silver atoms, but the object itself is gold. Right? That's like quantum mechanics is saying, oh yeah, everything behaves in this probabilistic fashion, except on the level that we operate on, in which case it's entirely mechanical. That's weird to me. But what I want to say is, in this period, there has been a translation of many of the artifacts of the previous economies into this new paradigm. And in particular, we have things like the memory palace. So we obviously have the cosmos, right? That's been translated into a heliocentric model. And as we know, we don't actually live in a heliocentric model, right? The Copernican revolution ran from Copernicus through Kepler, Galileo, Giordano Bruno, Tycho Brahe, and Newton. But Giordano Bruno was the only one who actually really saw the scale at which this was opening up, because Bruno wasn't even a heliocentrist. He was projecting where we are now, which is this decentralization of the cosmos. But one of the things that has occurred, if you think about it, like, how did they figure this stuff out? They figured it out because the surface appearance was looked like one thing, but when you did the math, you'd find another mechanism behind it. And so the whole ethos of the modernist period, the what Gebser would call the mental mutation, is about finding mechanisms and exploiting mechanisms, and in a way machinizing these intrinsic qualities. So what's happened with the memory palace is it's been turned into a machine, and the machine is the physical computer. The phantasmagoria, which used to be a type of puppet show, has been of the imagination, right, has been transformed into a machine, which is virtual realities. So we now live inside of an exo memory palace, that is an externalized, physically supported memory palace, where the art of memory is actually weaponized against us. So what is a commercial jingle? What's an ad? An ad is weaponized art of memory beamed at us so that we cannot forget what the advertiser wants us to remember. And so we're in this kind of like degenerate phase of the mental mutation, or degenerate phase of the materialist paradigm. I don't think we're going forward into the materialist paradigm. I think we're going beyond it. And I think we're going to retain many of the tools that we've learned from it. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to start gradually to draw them back into ourselves. So what I see is a study that we can make of the in a way, the modern period, the 20th century is the Renaissance inside out. Like literally, it's just been like pulled through its own navel and turned inside out. So instead of, creating these intrinsic internal memory palaces, we live inside one that is, constructed out of light. And so what we're able to conceive of is a path through technology that recovers this. I want to say, if we're talking about exotechnology, externalized technology, we can recover the endotechnology. And this starts as a type of counterweight to the effulgence of information that we're getting, because of course it's overwhelming all of our filters and so on. People are turning to magic to allow themselves to metabolize the sheer amount of information, right? Yeah. Information is what is knowledge? Knowledge is information that you remember, but we don't have a lot of knowledge. Knowledge has been switched. The definition of knowledge has been switched to access to information, but access to information is leverageable, right? So yeah, sure, you can find out anything by using Google, but it's not in your soul. You don't have it. You haven't done the discipline. You haven't done the work, and someone can shut off your access, or someone can manipulate the archive. So what we really need is powerful, sophisticated mnemotechnics that are the equivalent of an orally transmittable computer that we grow as a society that is an analog to the oral traditions of the ancient past, but is in response. I want to re-oralize society. And I think magic is the first step towards that. And I would like to reweave what's called the dream time. I feel that we can do that by beginning with magical technologies and then using them to metabolize the wild information and essentially grow to the size of our information environment. Evolve into it, right? Lean into it. And I want to cite a couple science fiction examples, because science fiction has inspired me. Obviously, the Dune, right? So the Mentat, right? The whole story, the backstory of Dune is that machines enable people to enslave one another, right? The famous quote is, once men thought that they could find freedom in machines, only to discover themselves enslaved by other men with machines. There's your AI analogy, and in the story, they make AI illegal. It becomes against the code to make a machine in the shape of a human.
Yeah, the jihad. Yeah,
the Butlerian jihad, which I read the books when I was 14. So like this was just and it's great that the movies are making this a topic of conversation. But I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. I can't wait for when Dune becomes relevant. So Dune is a key kind of inspiration for me. That idea of can we become mentats? Can we build an orally transmittable computer made of language, made of technique, and start to not need the prosthetic world so much, and be able to perform prodigious feats like memorizing, the GPS system. Could a human mind become okay? And also, you add telepathy into the mix. If we can synchronize ourselves telepathically, can we then share incredible abilities that we think only computers can do?
Yeah.
And this is what I want to program into calendars. This is why calendrics, because calendrics are the saturating medium that if they are sophisticated enough in a way that's similar to the Balinese or the Maya, but more suitable to our cosmology, we might be able to build these into the ubiquitous measure of time itself.
Oh, my word. Peter, I think today I've understood way more than I have in the past. I think really, really helpful. So I will say now, as we're coming towards the end, now there's a few things for people that want to learn more. Obviously, I would say I would recommend first of all your newsletter, right? So if you enjoy Peter's the subjects, the topics, the way he's describing these things, Peter's newsletter is an absolute goldmine. It's not just a newsletter; it's like a weekly magazine. It's got so much information there. So that I will put in the show notes below. I'll put the link in for that. And other ways of people getting involved in Meta Magick. I would suppose probably the best way would that be the Meta Magick scrying, or would it be a different approach?
The Meta Magick scrying course gives a way of creating a set of Meta Magick fields. So it gives the experience of taking magical systems, or really just creating the frameworks, because I don't actually imply any specific magic systems in that course, but I do show a number of magic squares and patterns. So it's basically about establishing an armature that can host multiple systems on it. But it is an introduction, and I would say that we should be releasing a full
tarot
32-week Meta Magick tarot course, which is based on a calendar of Venus. So there's several options. There's one is to buy this course from Perseus, and I think that would be I would certainly recommend that. I also conduct it live. So if you buy the course from Perseus, you can join my live calendaricized version where I do one class a week for basically just a top-up charge, right? So you basically the live course is slightly more expensive. The Perseus course is slightly less expensive. If you buy the Perseus course and check it out and you decide, wow, I want to join him for this journey, which will involve weekly Zoom meetings, then what you could pay is the difference. I think is $50 per second.
Yeah, which is huge. I mean, the huge value of doing this with you live is incredible, because just hearing you today, you're going to get so much more that's going to blossom over time.
And it's an example, right? So the Meta Magick tarot course is an example. It is me using one of the calendars to express tarot. So it's the Venus calendar. In the Mercury calendar, which I am also developing a course for, expresses Enochian, and the Mars calendar expresses some other things. So as I build more of these courses, it'll become more apparent how the Meta Magick as a methodology is connected to calendars, which produce fields, which are a calendar is an interface of psyche, cosmos, and socius. It's a triple interface. And if we establish those, we create the fields, it creates ripple effects in human experience. So join, check out my courses. Check out also, my Instagram, which I'm pretty soon I'm going to migrate all that material onto a blog. But right now I publish I basically put content up every day on my Instagram, which is 10,000 tarots. So it is the theme of the week using the Venus calendar. This week is death, for example. So everything up there this week is about the death card. But I go into all sorts of topics.
Huge details, huge topics.
It's not traditionalist at all. I mean, nothing what I'm doing is traditional.
Absolutely. And also, I believe in obviously you're a very busy man, but in the coming weeks or months, we have a follow-up written interview coming down the tube later on. So that will also bring more highlights to Peter's work. But I do recommend, because I'm in a privileged position, I get to see many people's work. And so sitting here in the center, seeing this, when I'm working with Peter's course at the moment, putting it all up, the tarot course, and I learn so much. just just from the small parts that I see, because that course as well. Let me make it clear as well. It's not just some video. It's I mean, you're getting the PDFs. The PDFs are like books in themselves.
Yeah. Especially towards the end, some of them are like, 30 pages a week. The last 10. So it goes, I might as well just say this about, if you go for the Meta Magick Tarot course, it starts with some basic stuff that people are going to recognize if you're familiar with the Golden Dawn Tarot stuff. But then towards the end, there will be a lot of very, I'll say, advanced material that just won't be anywhere else at this time.
Very, very unique
from my work.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I think today, certainly myself, I've understood things in much greater depth, and I think we'll continue unfolding this and seeing the potential of Meta Magick and what it can do for people. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think we had a great discussion, and just thank you, James, for everything you do. You're really you're lifting a lot of weight for the esoteric community in general, and you've really lifted up a lot of voices, and I just really want to say thank you for that and respect.
Well, thank you, Peter, and we shall continue. We're only just beginning, so I'll cut the recording there, hold the line, and we shall have a little chat.
All right.